Okay, so it's been an entire weekend since this was set up, and you can see the cilantro here is pretty wilty. The thyme and the dill look pretty decent. The dill's maybe a little wilty. When I came in, you can see how dry the soil looks there. It was a little bit drier actually, and it looked like it hadn't turned on all weekend. So I started messing with it, and I reset it, and it started pumping. And that's where you can see the moist soil there. See how much darker it is. And then after a while it cut off, so it was working. But the problem is that it's still thinking too dry of a soil is fully saturated. So what I'm going to have to do is adjust, and I think the way that I'm going to do that is by changing my bias resistor here. So this is what helps set the value. Remember, we have a voltage divider type setup. The resistance from here to here and here to here determines what the Arduino reads on this wire. So if I increase this value, it's gonna set the balance more evenly between the two, to where this doesn't have as high of a voltage across it, I believe. So I'm about to check that. Okay, so I went and replaced this resistor. First, I replaced it with a resistor that was about 10 times larger. I was at 2200 ohms, then I went to 3 mega ohms, and that made it worse. And so now I went smaller, and now I'm down to something that's a tenth of what it was, and we're getting more expected readings. So now I have to adjust the code. Okay, so we replaced this resistor and we updated the code, but in the time it took for that to happen, the moisture soaked all the way through the soil, and it's nice and wet all the way over to this side. So it's currently reading as good, and it's not turned the pump back on. We can already see that the cilantro is perking back up, just from the watering we had earlier. So we'll see how the new settings work. I think we're going to be good. It's currently reading as fully saturated, but considering how moist it is, that's a good reading. So we won't know until later in the day, once the sun starts to dry this out a little bit more. We'll see how it goes. Alright, so it's been one day since we made some updates to the circuit with this resistor and the code, and you can see this cilantro was hanging way down here and drooped over. You can see how much it's perked up. The thyme standing up even further than it was. The dill hardly has any droop in it, and the soil is good and moist when we got here today. So it seems to be working much better. I think what I'm going to do is add some LEDs down here and create a simple little binary counter so we can see how many times it runs, and we'll add in like a little reset button. That way we know how often it's running. But it looks like it's doing pretty good so far. I may also go ahead and when I do that, add in an indicator light for the float, water level float. That way we know when it goes low, and we don't have to connect to Bluetooth every time, at least for troubleshooting purposes during the setup phase.